nice day out. We're going to go and use our old saws and equipment on a real job, actually. One of the over-mature maples that I used to take down with my big McCulloch 797 and the like, one of those fell down. So we want to go up and prep it to be able to haul it out of there. They'll make, it's going to make a lot of firewood for somebody. So Bob has brought some Jonsereds of the era, 1970s. That's the era we're going to focus on. I've got my two Homelites that I put together yesterday in that prior video. And Jason bought his 1974 dump truck. It's 74 or 5, something in that era. Of course, I've got this. So you see the remnants of the motorcycle guys. One of the reasons why I'm kind of moving away from motorcycles for events and moving more towards chainsaws is that kind of thing right there. I got those damn yellow ribbons scattered throughout my entire woods now. Jason's old Ford. Used to be a town highway truck or a county truck one. Yeah, it's pretty steep. Yeah, right from that side over there. We also have another tree we got to work our way through over there. So I need to get access to that one there too. I don't want to come in through here. That's the project. Broke off from that big old maple.
cut. Yeah, now we got that one right there. That proves little saws can do it too. I think that one's going to be the big saw, I think. Yeah, big saw's better there. replacement for displacement moment. Wasn't that dirty? Huh? No, that's actually really clean. Well, we got that one ready to pull out the tractors. Not going to do that today. They're working on the next one down. It's another big over mature maple. So I'm all packed up and ready to move down. And Jason has a Partner 55, and that's very similar to the Husqvarna 50, 51, 55 series. And Bob is running a Jonsered 70E. And I hope you're noticing, it sounds like a modern saw, because you know something? A lot of the modern saw features were pioneered by the Jonsereds, and I think Bob's going to say something about that today. When you run those Jonsereds of that era, the 1970s era, 52 and the 70E and the like, they don't run a whole lot different than the new saws. They really don't. They were way, way, way ahead of their time. So anyway, gonna head down. Yeah, you guys got a lot of this blocked up before I got the old tractor down here.
Yeah, we're ready to pull.
You want to pull some out of there?
Yeah.
So it's break time. I want to have a little commentary about the saws in play here. I think I want to start out with this. Every time I run this 925, it always surprises me, you know. I have sort of a picture in my mind of what it's supposed to do. And then it gets faded after a few years of running 372s and modern saws. Then like today, go back and run this old bear. Thing's got some real power. It's a very useful saw. I guess this was a staple of the logging world for a long time. I think where I want to start is there was a time in the 60s and 70s where this is the kind of iron that did most of the woodwork, wood cutting in the United States. And while the average American was soldiering along with these red machines and those yellow metallics over in Sweden, they were beginning to work with stuff like that. And if you look at the way the saws are laid out, I think the Steels followed the Homelites and Macs before they started figuring out the right way of doing things. I don't know if I should say it that way, but I'm going to. And that's the horizontal cylinder, and these things here have got finger ports. Both of them do. And yeah, there's some good stuff like on the XL. It's got an internal clutch, so it's really easy to change the bar and chain and stuff like that. But the modern saw has its roots, I believe, in that yellow saw and these saws right here. I'll let Bob pick up from there.
Because we have to make things more interesting than just going out cutting wood. So the idea here was we rolled the calendar back about 40 years. And kind of looking at the saw timeline, that's kind of a long ways back. But if you went back another 40 years, you really didn't even have chainsaws. So this is kind of a ways back. And so we're in the 70s today. I've even got my Greg Allman 1974 concert shirt on.
That's really
so
cool.
we are in the 70s, and this is a 70E Jonsered. And one of the things we kind of figured out, we just wanted to run old saws today. And like the last time we did another one, we had it was all American old saws, and that was kind of compared them to like box store stuff as a dollar for dollar thing. We wanted to play with old saws again, but what we thought we'd do is mix in the American saws and some of the European saws, the Swedish stuff. And it kind of dawned on us while we were doing this that if you look at a modern chainsaw, the layout and everything, it's really not very different from this, except for the fact that in this case, your fuel tank is still part of the crankcase. You know, the truth is, the modern saw really, Jonsered for the most part, with some partner and Husky stuff, the birth of the modern chainsaw was really with this stuff. And that's when this transition took place, because you look from like about the 60s, late 60s, A77 Huskies around 1970. This was introduced in 77. I got a 621 that came out in 1970. So 1970, 1980, you had this kind of transition from this layout to this layout. And even though it's going to offend some people, you know, the Swedes really did that. It wasn't the Germans, it wasn't the Japanese, and that's really kind of where most of this stuff came.
Well, it's not just the layout of the saw; it's also the layout of the cylinders.
Yeah, you got the vertical, you got some anti-vibe. This is early versions of anti-vibe. I think these are the only two saws here that have some anti-vibe. And this is the rubber stuff. It's actually pretty effective for its time. I mean, I'm having fun running these things again today, but I've run these a lot. They feel more familiar to us because they are more similar to what you're getting today. So that's kind of the thesis of what we're doing here. Just old guys running old saws on an even older tree. The other tree we figured was over 100 years old that we did. And this one, God knows how old this thing is. We'll get an idea. So that's basically what we got. And then we got a partner 55 over here, which Jason brought, and it's been doing really more than its share to work today. It's only got a 16-inch bar, and it makes some huge cuts.
Well, it's not just the layout of the saw and the cylinder; it's also the port layout. If you look at some of the Jonsereds from the 70s into the 80s, they had closed port systems already, while Homelites and Steels and a lot of those still had finger ports. And up until the current generation, Husqvarna had the quad port layout before they went to the X-Torx. But the 371, that came out what, 90 something?
96.
Looking at the 460s I have in the bench and the 660s I have in the bench, and they still have the same port layout that my 2094 Jonsered had. That's very similar to an 80 Jonsered.
Well, there are companies out there, and you know what? I'm seeing some snow flurries here as we're talking.
You kidding me?
No, I'm not. But there are some companies out there that when they come out to innovations to their own saw line, it's less a result of their engineering departments and
bad.
more of a result of other companies' patents expiring. You know, we all got an XL12 here. Mine's still up in the truck. And I think that's appropriate because back then everybody would have had an XL12 anyway. You know, except guys who, keep in mind, you know, there was a big price difference between, you know, these Jonsereds and the typical Homelight or McCulloch back then too. So not everybody would buy these.
You brought up something as a difference between XL12s. Which one is this one here?
He's got one too.
So here's another one. You were saying there's the 54s and the 58s, or is it 56s?
Yeah, there's two displacements. There's 58 and then the other one's 54 or 55. But
and you can tell them by how?
Well, kind of how you can tell is if you got your oil fill up here, it's the larger cylinder from what I've been able to figure out. And if you got your oil fill back here under the muffler on the corner, it's the smaller cylinder. And also, if the oil fill's up here, you got the automatic oiler as opposed to the thumb only.
So both of these are automatics?
Yeah.
Yep. Well, even though it's an old saw, this old thing here honks. No doubt about it. When I was running it up there, you can see on video, this is a 28-inch bar. And last video I put together, I said, you know something? That's a bit much bar for this old saw. Well, I was wrong. It didn't have any trouble at all pulling this 28-inch bar in that hard maple.
Well, really, this did pretty good too. The kind of thing where snobs like to make fun of those things. But, you know, that really, other than the 1010 McCulloch, for the better part of a generation, that was America's firewood saw. And God knows where else they sold the things.
So what did a pro have as a two saw set, or the big saw, medium saw, little saw type things?
What was a logger using in the woods?
Yeah.
Probably that.
One of these?
Yeah, this would be like a lot of pulpwood guys who run these things. You know, some of the innovations that really, not just a performance thing, but one of the biggest things for the guys who ran them all day long was the anti-vibe.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we're just doing this for a day, and then, you know, we're having fun running old saws, but we don't have to run them tomorrow and the rest of the week.
This one here has got rubber mounts. I guess the 944, no kidding, it's snowing.
I told you it was snowing.
Oh my God.
It always is snowing
It's
here.
Central New York.
It always
Welcome
snows
to
here.
Central New York. Oh, this is really apropos.
This is great. This is great.
But this one here
It
actually
may
has,
not be in the store tomorrow.
yeah, this one here actually has very primitive anti-vibe. And they went from the 925 to the 944, and that one had an anti-vibe system. But by that time, the Swedish saws had just blown right by them technology-wise. And if you follow the Homelight lineage, you had like the 750s, 650s, and 750s that kind of came into play, what, late 70s into the
Yeah.
80s? And then their last hurrah was like the 410s and that 540 that I have.
540 and the 8800, and they were good saws.
Yeah,
That was their last good design.
the 8800 was the last
You know,
one.
there was also a divergence in strategy too, because the Swedes, they started to think more in terms of chain speed than just brute power, and that was one of the reasons why the saws could get lighter and still do a lot of work.
Yeah,
I think we demonstrated that earlier with the
55.
That thing was unreal.
When we were
that,
cutting-
that really did well.
side by side with that, the difference in the RPM is
Only about 2,000.
Yeah.
Tell me about this 70E.
There's basically two. There's the one with the coil attached to the cylinder, and there's one with the coil attached to the starter that comes off with the starter. And you can also tell by the flywheel. One of the problems with the early ones, they used a plastic fan that bolted to the flywheel, and anything got in there and a fan got chewed up, and you cannot find those fans. Don't tell that, you get messages people want to buy them.
I'm not selling them.
But the other thing that this is one of the metal ones, by the way, and you know, other than that, these things really didn't change. Other than, you know, from the 621, which is up in the truck, we can't really show. But one of the things they started improving on was the better air filters, better sealing for the air filters. This was really kind of what we consider the 70cc class today. This was kind of what really got that going, and it'll hold its own really with the 70cc saws of today.
Well, I took a little video up there, and you could hear that saw, or you could hear the 52 one.
Yeah, the 52's got a little bit of a bark to it because they opened up the muffler. You know, the 70E is, there's a lot of these still going because of the build quality that they had, and they sold a bunch of these things. You know, one of the reasons people would keep these going is because they're not dated. You can run, you know, when you're running these things, we're having fun doing it, but you know you're running an old saw.
No doubt.
But when you're running one of these, it just doesn't feel as dated. And that's, again, that's a testament, you know, to what they were doing back then. These things were way ahead of their time. You have to, you know, keep in mind, we're talking the 70s, and, you know, these things, by virtue of the fact that they still feel kind of contemporary today, that's really what kind of proves that.
So, the business lineage, the company lineage, you had Partner, you had Jonsered, you had Husqvarna, and they all pretty much had a similar design strategy. They were kind of the same layout into the 70s. Then who started eating who?
Well, Electrolux Husky kind of gobbled them up. Electrolux bought Husky. They bought them all. And, you know, there was a lot of great ideas that came to Jonsered. You know, these saws were really state of the art. And then, you know, they had to replace them. These were expensive saws to make. And that's why they cost what they did. And then they decided, like a lot of companies, it's not just American companies that want to, you know, cut the bottom line. So they decided, you know, they had to reduce costs in manufacturing. So the stuff that really replaced this wasn't that good. Hurt Jonsered a little bit market share. You know, Partner had a lot of innovative designs, but they really only had pockets of success market-wise. And they don't get the credit really that they should, the Partner engineers, for a lot of the stuff that was incorporated into the Johnnies and the Huskies. They really don't, and they should.
That Jonsered 2077 and 2083, wasn't that a Partner?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
But they were heavy for
They
what
were
they
heavy,
were.
yeah.
The 83, I think, was pretty good. Parts for those things are really hard to get
I know.
because you know, there was really no Husqvarna version of that, so they're not out there. The field population isn't that much that they're going to keep retooling and making parts for those things.
How much did these cost back in, like, you mentioned that this was more expensive. So what kind of costs were we looking at back in the 70s?
Well, these things cost about what a saw costs now. I'm actually somewhere. I got a 1980 Jonsered price list, and you know,
In today's dollars or
no,
dollars for dollar?
it's the 1980 list out of one of those old books.
And they're $800.
No, not 800, but like
$500 or
something like,
$600.
yeah, they're up like in the six range.
Which is close to $1,000 now.
That's huge money
probably.
in 1980.
Yeah.
How much was an XL12? You could pick one up in a hardware store back then, couldn't you?
Yeah, it was probably less than half of that. Now that's just a guess. But I'm thinking they were probably going back then for like 250 to 300. That's just a guess.
Maybe even a little less.
Yeah, I'd be
Maybe even
surprised.
under.
I'd be surprised if they were much more than that.
Let me make sure this is all being recorded because that's some gold right there, that information.
Because we don't use them that much. These things have all been sitting. So if there's any issues the way they act up, it's not because of their designs. They're not even really
No
their age.
fault of the
It's
saw.
really just because they've been sitting. What we did, and this was Walter's idea, which was a good one, was you know, we're going to make or break. We got to get it done today. We did not bring any modern saws to back us up. Everything we're going to get done today, it's either going to get done with the old saws, or we've got to go down and eat.
And before we can go eat, we have to at least create a load of wood or two.
Yeah. We've got 19 minutes left on the battery.
Right, well, that's enough bullshitting then.
Enough PS.
Yeah.
Get some work done.
I'm gonna break this off, and we'll do a little more cut and break this up.
Good shot. The other comment, you know, is that these saws the newer saws operate at much higher RPMs now.
Yeah, that's an XL he's got going.
Yeah.
It does show they make chips.
I'm gonna take another cut here.
You know, we see one come through the shop like every 2 years. It's just almost never see them.
But, I mean, I think when they came in, the European saws came in, it was a little like European cars. They tended to be more expensive. You know, they own the market now, but when they were coming in, the American companies, mostly Homelight and McCulloch, were really entrenched. I mean, they owned it.
Right.
I think it's interesting to me on how many of the European companies came over, but how few survived. You got Dolmars, and I know Electrolux was a big part of that, but
Well, yeah, I mean, Electrolux swallowed up a bunch, but there were so many. I mean, there were all the Italian companies, you know, that, you know, EFCO, and they used to be Olympic, you know, Alpina was a brand. Yeah, a lot of companies came over and never really established the market share that made sense for them to stay here. You know, Solo bagged the whole chainsaw market for the U.S. now. I mean, I know there's people want to blame the EPA, but it's not so much the EPA ruined it as much as these companies never cultivated the market to the point where they had enough market share for it to make sense for them to get the EPA certifications.
Of getting involved in this, and without having the history or the involvement going back a long time, a lot of people think like this is new, and they're like, just because they're discovering it, they think that it hasn't been discovered 20 years ago.
They've been doing
And,
it for
and
years.
a little different example, not so much the building, but like, you know, when I first met you guys, which was 2010, so that's how quick this shit's going by. But you know, there was all the, and this isn't something that ought to be on. This is
Let me
still
shut it
taping.
off.